Welcome to the Fantasy Football Report for Week 7. So much to discuss today. Really excited to be joined by a guest this week, Sam Sherman from Stat Chasing. If you haven't checked that out, definitely be sure to watch that show and listen to that podcast. But yeah, excited to have you joining us. How's it going?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks, Blair, and thanks, Hasan, for having me. I'm glad I could join this week. I mean, unfortunately, we had a lot of injuries this week, but that'll make for an interesting show to break this down. And yeah, it was an interesting week of football with CMC debuting for the 49ers and a whole lot of injuries. So excited to break it down.
Thanks for joining us. By the way, for those of you who don't follow Sam, please do at Sherman_FFB. He is quickly becoming one of the premier sources for your fantasy info, especially with his charts that he puts out there on his feed. You really gonna want to get that into your life if you're a visual learner. Which if you're watching this podcast, I assume you are. If you're listening to it, you're gonna want something to actually look at. So I would strongly encourage you to subscribe and follow him on Twitter. And if it's and you know what, we're just gonna jump right into this. Sam, Wan'Dale Robinson got 6 of 8 targets for 50 yards in the Giants' Week 7 win over the Jaguars. Is it his time? Is this it?
I think it is. I mean, I was monitoring this situation closely. I think he had about 20 to 25% of the routes run last week, and that jumped up all the way to around the 80% range this week, just looking at the data quickly. So I think that's really exciting. He's by far the most talented wide receiver on the Giants right now. I don't know if Kadarius Toney even exists anymore. Maybe he can challenge for that once he comes back. But yeah, I think it's definitely time for Wan'Dale, and I'm starting him with confidence in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's actually genuinely pretty exciting to hear. Just because his price was so cheap in best ball this offseason. I know you've been big on the resurrection drafts. What has his price climbed up significantly there? What is your take on his status going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the resurrection closed, I believe, a couple weeks ago. I think his price was pretty depressed in that because he was still had that injury when those drafts closed, so we didn't really get much of a look at him. But yeah, for the price you got him at this summer in the 16th, 15th round in best ball drafts, I think that looks like it's going to pay off. The Giants offense, obviously, a ton of the Giants offense is going to run through Barkley, but it does look a lot more efficient and explosive than I expected to start the year. And he looks like the main guy in the passing game there. So yeah, definitely excited about him going forward.
An auxiliary guy, Darius Slayton, seems to be making waves. He got 3 of his 6 targets today for 58 yards and a score. I picked up and then dropped Slayton in a bunch of places. What are your thoughts on him? Is he startable? Is he just sort of a flyer? What are you doing with Slayton here?
Yeah, I think he's startable as sort of a flyer flex type start. I think he's from watching the game today, Wan'Dale is getting a lot more of the scheme sort of short area targets. And I think you can expect a decent PPR floor for him. Slayton is the bigger bodied guy that's getting used deeper down the field. I think we saw that a lot in his rookie year. That was quite impressive. He had a lot of yards and sort of limited catches, deep A-dot guy. So if you're in a pinch, I think he's a decent upside shot in that he can break the long play. But I think what's interesting with the Giants, I'm looking at the routes run now. Marcus Johnson actually led the team in routes with 36, and then Wan'Dale and Slayton are down in the 29 and 26 routes run range. So I would think that would shift and that Slayton and Wan'Dale will start to run all the routes and take some away from Sills, Marcus Johnson, these guys that we've never heard of. But there could be a little bit of hidden upside there if Slayton and Wan'Dale can get a little bit more routes, which I think is possible.
Yeah, Wan'Dale did take a kind of a big hit in this one and limp off the field in the first half.
Okay.
He ended up staying in the game, but that he actually wasn't used that much after after that hit, and that also probably had something to do with him not getting a ton of routes. But hopefully, it's nothing serious there.
Yeah, just to round out this picture, Marcus Johnson may be running all the routes, but man is out there just exercising. He had like 3 targets and he put up a goose egg there. Like this guy, I mean, like what's he doing, running wind sprints, right? Like, do they even use him as a deep threat? I don't know. Maybe just jogging.
I think Allen Robinson sent him his cardio routine, I think, before the game.
Honestly, they should. I'm actually just gonna start doing what they're doing, just because it seems to be a good way to stay in shape. just running, jogging up and down. One guy who we are big fans of on the Jaguar side, just because they did lose, but Christian Kirk had a kind of a big showing, 10 targets. He got 7 of those for 96 yards. Sam, like, where are you ranking Christian Kirk rest of the season? Like, do you have him as like, wide receiver? Like, do you put him as like a top 12 wide receiver, or where do you have him really, given this target volume and upside?
Yeah. I think he started off the season in the first 4 weeks, I believe, in a role that looked like it was wide receiver 1, top 12 usage. Now that kind of fell off a cliff the past couple of weeks with some low target games when the Jaguars offense just collapsed for whatever reason. I think now he's more, for me, probably in the mid-range wide receiver 2 range. Like, I look at a lot at weighted targets per route run, and before this week, he's in the 50% range for weighted targets per route run. So that's solid, but not elite, not true wide receiver 1 usage. And just to explain that metric more, I'm sure your listeners are familiar, but it's essentially targets per route run, but adjusted for ADOT there. So yeah, I would say mid-range wide receiver 2. I think if the Jags offense picks things up a little bit, he still has a lot of upside, but not completely dominating targets in that offense.
I think, I think that's probably right about Kirk. I mean, part of the problem is you kind of have a question about what kind of offense you're going to get out of Jacksonville, even on a week when Lawrence attempts 43 passes.
43, yeah.
10 yards is still
threw for no touchdowns though.
Right. There's still not a lot of fantasy scoring for these wide receivers. I mean, one thing that I was happy to see though is ETN getting basically all of the running back work. I mean, I think James Robinson had 1 target and
no carries,
and that was it. So
yeah,
I've been waiting
for ETN. Sorry, go ahead. And I was gonna say, and just the like underlying routes really back that up. It was 24 routes for ETN to just 4 for James Robinson. So I think we saw like a pretty close 50-50 split in the passing game usage for most of the season, and now that seems to be going all to ETN, which is really bullish for him rest of the season.
It sounds a little crazy to say that, but there's still upside here with ETN, right? Like 14 carries, 114 yards and a score. Lawrence still vultured another goal line score, which is really frustrating because he's not throwing any, but he's taking them away from ETN. And then ETN caught 1 of his 5 targets for 5 yards, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're looking at ETN. I don't know about you, Sam or Blair, but like I've probably got ETN as like a top 8 running back rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, with the Hall injury and all this other chaos, it's hard to disagree with that. And also to your point, I think ETN fumbled at like the 5-yard line in this game too, on a play that looked like it could have been a touchdown. So he could have, like you said, the stat line could have been insane today. But yeah, I think that's about right. Like he's definitely in the running back 1 conversation with the usage today. Blair, do you have thoughts on that?
No, I agree. And I mean, the one thing that's been really nice about ETN is even when, like in every week, pretty much, he's been just crazy efficient, especially with the rushing. And so to see him start to get the workload that kind of will make the scoring more consistent, you could see him have just a pretty insane ceiling if he could kind of combine, get into the end zone a couple more times instead of fumbling at the goal line.
I really hate to interject. So just as a reminder, we do record this like at 7 p.m. This is during the middle of the games that are going on. Patrick Mahomes just threw a 31-yard touchdown. Well, there was 31 yards after the catch, 45-yard touchdown to our boy Juju Smith-Schuster.
All
Guys, Juju Smith-Schuster with 7 receptions, 125 yards and a score. We will be breaking this game down later in the show. So for audio listeners, this is just as a preview because we're reacting to this right now. But just to go back to just the Jaguars' offense, I wanted to get your guys' takes on this because I'm a little lost here. Evan Ingram, Marvin Jones, and Zay Jones have appeared as some kind of clear tier below Christian Kirk, right? How do you rank these three going forward rest of the season? Just raw from a raw production, because I think I've got Zay Jones ahead of Evan Ingram and Marvin Jones, but I've got Evan Ingram ranked over Marvin Jones.
I think, yeah. I mean, if we're just talking like fantasy points, I agree with that. I think just like obviously the tight end eligibility for Evan Ingram, like I think he's perhaps the slightly more valuable fantasy asset than Zay Jones, just because you can play him at tight end. So over the first 6 weeks, doesn't factor in this past week. His pass route percentage, so percent of team dropbacks where he's running a passing route, is at around 80%, which is a top 7 rate in the entire NFL at the tight end position, around guys like Kittle, Andrews, Kelsey, Higbee, etc. So his passing game role is really strong, and I think that there could be some blow up games coming for Ingram. But yeah, I agree with you. If like I'm projecting the points out, I would put Jones ahead of Ingram, but just the fantasy asset value is maybe slightly higher for Ingram.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you can't afford to kind of sneeze at 7 targets at the tight end position. But I mean, in terms of the receivers on this team, like I honestly don't want them kind of near my fantasy teams, except for Kirk. But it would be nice if we saw, Lawrence had that one big game where he was making things happen through the air. If we see that a few more times and we think that there can be some scoring on this team on a regular basis in the passing game, then maybe things change. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to roster Zay Jones, right?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a lot of upside there with Zay Jones.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm talking about these guys is, Evan Ingram's definitely rostered, especially when it comes down to the FFPC. Mm-hmm. But if Zay or Marvin Jones are somehow out there in your main events or football guys teams, we're getting into the buys, and some of them have like they're just very heavy. Like I don't know about you guys, but this week, with the handful of the teams that were gone, I was left plugging in guys like James Robinson and stuff into lineups and getting rewarded with, goose eggs. Like, might as well have not bothered at that point, right? Like, oh, what am I even doing here?
Yeah, I will say the one note on Zay Jones, which I think is interesting. If you look at, again, back to the weighted targets per route run metric, he actually has a higher weighted targets per route run than Kirk. It's quite close. It's not like a noticeable difference, and that could even change after this week's data, but their roles aren't that different. It's just that, I think Kirk is a better player and more likely to be efficient on his targets going forward. But there is some sort of like buy low upside with Zay Jones there, whereas his role is stronger than his fantasy point scoring would suggest, I think.
Yeah. Here's another guy who we thought was kind of left for dead. Antonio Gibson. He rushed 10 times for 59 yards today, and he also got he had 3 receptions for 18 yards and a score and this is going to sound crazy, the Commanders' Week 7 win over the Packers. So I guess realistically with Gibson, are you buying this level of usage versus Brian Robinson, who they clearly prefer, or like is like Gibson more game flow dependent?
That's tough. You know, I would like to see the snaps data on this one. I don't have that in front of me yet, but just looking at the box score, what stands out to me is, you know, it looks like Gibson took over for McKissick more so than he took over for Robinson. Robinson was still heavily involved with 20 carries. He saw 2 targets of his own, whereas McKissick only had 2 targets, no catches, only had 1 carry. So if this moves into a situation where Gibson becomes the preferred third down and passing down back, I think on this offense that's likely to be playing from behind a bunch, he can have some sort of consistent PPR fantasy value. Now, I just don't know if this was sort of like a fluky box score where I can't see that McKissick actually played a bunch or whatever yet, but I don't know. I guess my to be a little more concrete, like I think we need this to become a 2-man backfield instead of a 3-man to really trust Gibson. But you know, he just looks so much better than Robinson and McKissick out there. I don't quite get why his role has been reduced, but I probably need to see this a little bit more consistently to like trust him on a game in, game out basis.
I think realistically what happened to McKissick is, and even when the data comes out is going to probably back me up, is Green Bay went up really early in the first quarter off of a McKissick where he kind of, I think he got in, like it was a pass intended for McKissick, then it was intercepted and ran back for 63 yards for a score. But then again, that's kind of always been like JD McKissick has always been this kind of lacking upside kind of guy, right? Like he's just sort of been this
theoretic type.
Yeah, exactly. This theoretic, but like without the yak ability. Like he's just sort of been like a guy who catches the football and falls down, and like that's been his like that's where you can get like 15 PPR points out of him. Mm-hmm. But like, you know, just to what you just said, like yeah, it'd be great to have an actual explosive playmaker in Gibson getting that work, right? And so maybe this, like maybe today could be the start of this going into a 2-man backfield situation, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just from watching the game, like you would think that the Commanders coaches, when you see Gibson try to get to the edge and then compare that to Brian Robinson, it's like they're playing different sports. I can't see how the coaches won't see that. There's just a couple plays in this game where Gibson is clearly more explosive. So you never know what's going behind the scenes there, but you would think this signals more usage for him going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave Curtis Samuel a handful of carries more than I think they've historically given him. He had 5 carries for 26 yards. Also saw 8 targets. He caught 5 of them for 53 yards. I mean, like Curtis Samuel, like clearly has like I guess the question really for you, Sam, is Samuel like a you know, can you flex him with confidence?
I think so. I think the stat this season, and I guess this changed this week. Oh no, Samuel and McLaurin both have the same amount of targets. I think Samuel has out-targeted McLaurin in every game this year or something close to that. You know, he's getting a lot of the schemes, short area, screens, you know, looks out of the backfield, that type of stuff. So they're not the most valuable targets, but I think they're very consistent, and I think he really has a steady PPR floor where unless you're just completely stocked at wide receiver and hit on all your early round picks. I think if you picked up Samuel early on waivers or draft him late on your teams, I think he's someone that you can start with confidence every week. Just the target floor is really strong for him.
On the Packers' side of the ball, wanted to talk about Romeo Doubs. 4 targets and goose eggs across the board. Is this just sort of like growing pains here in your opinion, or you know, does he need to do more really to earn Aaron Rodgers' trust? Although to be fair, like not like the other wide receivers are much better here.
Yeah, you got Sammy Watkins out there. Randall Cobb. I guess Randall Cobb's injured. Man, I don't know. It's tough with Dobbs because I think his target earning stuff has been okay. You know, looking up into this week again, looking at weighted targets for route run of around 50%. That's in sort of a a middling range, but pretty solid for a rookie. Something you'd expect that he could grow on throughout the course of the year once he gets up to speed in the NFL. But man, the results just haven't been there for him, and I wonder if like once Christian Watson comes back, once Cobb gets back, they're gonna go to more of a rotation versus playing Dobbs in a full-time role. That's a bit of speculation, but he's been out there a lot and hasn't really performed super well, and I wonder if that will sort of hurt him in the long run.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Blair, like, because like this is a team that's genuinely prided itself on punting wide receiver for the last few years. Like the early second round pick that they spent on Christian Watson really hasn't come to fruition, right? They spent the last bunch of drafts passing on elite pass catchers in order to pick up defensive players, right? And they've put in so many resources into their defense, and like realistically, what does it earn them is a first round exit every year, right, in the playoffs, and frankly, in humiliating fashion, right? I mean, today they used Aaron Jones as their primary like receiver. 10 targets, he got 9 of those for 53 yards and 2 scores. Like, I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the second score, but like he's really bailed out Rodgers on what was frankly an underthrown pass. Like, had the DB turned around, that was an int. I mean, Rodgers has been playing like a man who's been like, consuming ayahuasca this entire offseason anyway. So that's not ideal. But the fact that you're relying on a running back as your primary, like for the first time this season, they've relied on him as their primary pass catcher. I think that spells, I mean, the fact that there aren't, alarm bells going off in Green Bay right now is like ridiculous to me. Sam, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, Aaron Jones's role going forward.
Yeah.
Do you really think that he is set up for some kind of CMC light, from 2019 kind of usage going forward?
I kind of was buying that narrative going into the year that his receiving usage was going to spike without Devontae Adams. There was people had brought up the splits in the past couple of years whenever Devontae had missed time, that Jones' receiving usage goes way up. But to start the year up until today, that has really not been true. He hadn't seen more than 5 targets in any game so far this season, averaging less than 4 targets per game, which is actually less targets than he had been receiving each of the past 3 years. So, it's definitely a good sign today for him that target usage spiked up to 10, but I'm kind of seeing it more as noise than a true trend for now, given it's just 1 out of 7 games, and he really hasn't been a huge factor in the receiving game up into today. So yeah, definitely something I'm monitoring, but I'm more likely to see that as noise than a true trend. I think also the fact they lost the game today, it's not going to be like, oh, this really worked. Like, they lost the game. So sometimes I think that stuff matters for coaches when they're game planning going forward.
Yeah, the other thing about this game is that it was the first, up until now, it's been kind of an even split between Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And this was the first time. In fact, in a lot of games, Dillon has actually had more targets than Jones. This was really the first time that Dillon kind of was completely not even used in the passing game.
No, script went pretty sideways for them pretty quick, but he wasn't even seeing much usage when they were leading.
Yeah.
And he wasn't on the injury report at all, was he? Right?
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, and just to your point, I saw the Green Bay snaps stuff just came out. 40 snaps today for Aaron Jones to 16 for A.J. Dillon. That's a huge difference from what we have seen so far this year. And 25 routes for Jones to just 8 for Dillon.
Yeah, that's a wide gulf. I guess it's something to monitor on the Dillon front, right?
Yeah, I think Sam is right that it's just one game that Green Bay lost, so it's not necessarily a trend just yet, but it's definitely something to monitor.
Yeah, and if the snap, I guess when I said that, I hadn't seen the snaps data yet, so I think that's a good point, Blair. That if this snap usage is sticky for these two running backs, then maybe we can start to see the Aaron Jones passing game upside a bit more.
I think that Jones has led in snaps pretty much every game this year, but it's never been by this big a margin. It's usually been like 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been kind of thin. Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing, right? Like we're a little over a third of the way through the season. Like I don't really know if guys who are taking Jones that 1-2 turn are really going to get the returns they were looking for from him anyway. He's been fairly quiet until this week. Like he's delivered you very consistent RB3 weeks, which that price is not going to get you anything.
Yeah. And it also, like, I think the thing with Jones that made him such an exciting fantasy asset in years past is that the Green Bay offense was humming a lot of those years, and he could just luck into that like 5 touchdown game or that 3 receiving touchdown game that, you know, we'd seen a couple of those huge games from him in the past. And man, with this Green Bay offense right now, it's kind of hard to see him getting those huge, you know, multi-touchdown games going forward. But we'll see, I guess. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Rodgers can take some DMT or something and turn this around.
Yeah, that's what he needs to do.
Seeing as we're talking, Ken Walker, 74-yard touchdown run.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we can just, and that should be just a bit of a tease for what's coming later. Because I do have some questions for Sam down at the end. We're going to talk about his counterpart later, his trade counterpart. But you know, DJ Moore today got 7 of his 10 targets for 69 yards and a score in Carolina's Week 7 win over Tampa Bay. Sam, like, this is it, right? It gets now or never for DJM.
Yeah, I think this was definitely promising to see that he dominated targets in this game with CMC out. You know, my guess as to what kind of is going on here from a football standpoint is that a lot of sort of schemed short area stuff that was going to McCaffrey out of the backfield probably shifted over to Moore. With Hubbard and Deonta Foreman not providing much in that area. So I think you can keep a light on for Moore. I think like the panic on him was a little bit overblown and that his role was still pretty solid. It's honestly like a little bit of a, you know, Kyle Pitts, Drake London situation, like really good role and just an awful offense. And if that role gets a little bit better and the Panthers offense can get a little bit less awful, maybe with Darnold potentially coming back and giving a little bit of life into that offense, I think DJ Moore can, you know, do better to close out the year. And again, I guess to the Darnold point, I was originally sort of skeptical about any kind of narrative of Sam Darnold saving anyone's fantasy season, but DJ Moore did have a pretty good stretch with him to start the year last year. So, you know, I think we all think Darnold sucks, but he probably sucks less than this version of Baker and PJ Walker. So, yeah, we'll see.
Only 22 pass attempts in this game, but the guy who was tied for second in targets, Terrace Marshall, had 31 yards. Probably it's nothing, but do you think that he might become relevant all of a sudden with all these targets opening up?
I honestly don't think so. I've fallen for the Terrace Marshall thing before, so maybe I'm biased for getting burned on that. But yeah, he hasn't really shown much at the NFL level. Had a really bad targets per route run last year. I think one of the worst in the rookie class from last year. And I think I would not be chasing the Terrace Marshall stuff. It's just, you know, I think in this offense, it's DJ Moore. Maybe one of the running backs will emerge. I think Foreman actually got hurt today, so maybe Hubbard is playable as sort of a flex, but you're not looking deep into the ancillary pieces for, you know, Shi Smith or Terrace Marshall in this offense.
What I did want to ask about the running backs, but I think it was Hubbard that hurt his ankle.
Oh, was it? Okay, maybe I got that mixed up.
Um,
Sorry.
Yeah, he actually he got the start, and then Foreman came in and played better. But I think it was because Hubbard left the game. Oh no, he didn't leave until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm seeing
so-
Hubbard. Yeah, left in fourth quarter with an ankle, apparently. So
Yeah.
not many details on that yet.
Right. I mean, if Hubbard is hurt, then obviously Foreman is going to get at least a shot to kind of be the lead back for the short term. But do you have a lean on this backfield as to who you'd rather kind of add to your teams?
Yeah. I think, it'd be interesting to see what the numbers were pre-injury. I'm guessing it was pretty close to a 50-50 split. My lean would be Foreman, I think, just from a talent perspective. I thought he looked pretty good last year in Tennessee, sort of filling in for Derrick Henry. I don't think Hubbard really showed much at all last year, filling in for McCaffrey. So just sort of based off that small sample, I'd prefer Foreman. And it does look like he had the edge in usage today in terms of snaps. But again, that might have been due to injury. I'm guessing it was pretty close to 50-50.
Yeah.
So Kyle Pitts got 3 of his 5 targets for 9 yards. The Falcons is a Week 7 loss to the Bengals. I'm not even going to say it. I mean, like, realistically, I don't even know what to say because it was such a disappointing beatdown. Like, Marcus Mariota attempted 13 passes in a game where the Bengals beat the snot out of them. Like, like if you're not going to throw the football, and he led the team in targets, right? Like, he had 5 targets today. If you're not going to throw the football and you're going to establish a run, being down multiple scores, and on the other side, like what hope do we have for any of these pass catchers in Drake London or Kyle Pitts to even hit one? Like, Sam, I want to get your take there. And 2, do you think it's time for them to finally just throw in the towel and play Ritter?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the Ritter thing second. Just assuming that Mariota stays in offense first. I think this is a huge red flag for any hope you have for the Falcons pass catchers. Unfortunately, for some reason I have a lot of Falcons on my fantasy team this year. I don't know how that happened. We're still looking for the guy. We're still looking for the guy who did that. But man, so I had some hope that in a game where the Falcons were going to get pushed, they would open up the offense a little bit. There was some reason to believe that the stretch of really low pass attempt games was just due to game script. The Falcons had done a good job of sort of staying close in games and getting a lead. But man, it's just brutal that even when they're down the entire game, they're not opening up the offense at all. And then 5 of their 6 next games are against the Panthers twice, the Bears, the Commanders, and the Steelers. So, like, yeah, that's just not looking good. I mean, maybe them being pushed doesn't even matter, but they're not going to really get pushed in those games too much, I don't think, anyways. And then to the Ritter point, the thing is that division is so bad, right? The Bucks lost to the Panthers today. The Saints got killed by the Cardinals. Like, the Falcons are still very much in the division race. And I think that's going to push Arthur Smith to keep Mariota as the starter as long as they're in contention. I would guess, I mean, we don't know anything about Ritter, right? But I would guess that Mariota still gives the team a better chance of winning football games, even though the style of play for that offense is really bad. So yeah, I have a hard time seeing them make the move to Ritter because I think Mariota is kind of executing how Arthur Smith wants the offense to be run. But yeah, to your point again, like if we're going to have any hope for the pass catchers, I think we need a new quarterback in there because we've seen how Arthur Smith wants to run the offense with Mariota. And it's just it's one of the most unfriendly, passing games I've seen for pass catchers over the last several years.
Might as well just move to the wing T, man. like what's even weirder is that, like, we're not seeing, I don't know, more RPO stuff from Mariota, right? Like, he's putting up a decent floor, but just I don't know, nothing there.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make a brief note. Like Tyler Boyd got 8 of his 9 targets for 155 yards and a score. So I think that's his career high in yardage there. But I think every Bengals player dumpstered the Falcons today. So, how are you? Can you like reliably start Boyd, or is this just spit more noise here and he's just the guy who you're just going to miss on?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think that like I thought that some of the Boyd stuff today was maybe due to T. Higgins still being a little bit limited with the ankle. I did see Mike Thomas like playing a little bit more than I'd expect for Higgins on a normal week, so that might be explained like part of why Boyd has seen some better performances the past couple weeks. But yeah, I don't know. I think he's still in the wide receiver 3 range, and like he's definitely somebody during bye weeks that you probably have to start. And I think the thing that you can be excited about is like he definitely has upside. This is a good offense. We know there will be games where they can air it out and score a ton of points. So he's definitely like a higher upside, maybe flex fill in, but I'm not sure we're at the point where, he's a plug and play wide receiver 2 or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, with the buys, like you said, you almost have to start him, especially when he can give you a game like this, even when Higgins is healthy and stuff. I mean, the Bengals use a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, so he's on the field a lot for kind of a third wide receiver option. So there are definitely worse players to have in your starting lineup, but it's always hard to trust, I think.
Yeah. I did want to make a quick note on we can go back to the Bengals if you have more questions. Just before we move on to the Falcons, I did just quickly want to throw out that it looks like Algier took over that backfield today in a pretty meaningful way. 29 snaps to Caleb Huntley's 11. And I think it had been much closer to a 50-50 split with those guys in past weeks. So that's something to note there. I think you can have a little bit more confidence in starting Algier. Once Damian Williams and CPAT come back, that will muddy things up again. But at least until those guys are back, Algier looks like a pretty solid flex RB2 starter.
Yeah. That's actually a really good note, especially when you're trying to catch these guys in their pockets of like peak usage, right? And Algier is one of those guys sitting right in that pocket. Gonna skip a little bit down on our sheet. We're gonna there's been a lot of movement in these PM games that we got to get to. Initially, I want to talk about Breece Hall. He was going off before he was diagnosed with a knee injury and did not return to the Jets' Week 7 game against the Broncos there. The Jets beat the Broncos, surprise, surprise. And Michael Carter saw a lot of work there. Assuming Breece is sidelined for a few weeks, like where are you ranking Michael Carter? Like, is he like in that same, RB? Like, is he like in that top 15 RB range for you, or what are you doing there?
Yeah, I think he's definitely in the top 15 running backs, especially during the bye weeks. I think the talent on Michael Carter is pretty good. We saw it early this year. He had some big games, some big target and high catch games. Last year, I thought he looked pretty good as a rookie. They just kind of used him in this frustrating timeshare with Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson. So I would guess with how they've like used Carter and Breece so far this year, it's been a pretty clear-cut just 2-man backfield. They introduced Ty Johnson, I think, in like week 2 and then quickly like threw him back to the sideline. So I think that's a bit of a signal that they really view it's Carter and Breece Hall and then like a big tier break to their next group of running backs. So I'd expect strong usage for Carter as long as Breece is out. I think, low end RB1 status sounds about right to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even when even with Hall in the game, and even the last few games with him kind of really taking over the backfield, still Carter had some value where he was getting a lot of goal line carries. He was getting a few targets. So, there's still, like you could even see these guys both be like a top 24 running back in some scenarios without too much trouble. So I think if Hall does have to miss a lot of time, then Carter is like a must start player.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jets are clearly interested in making sure that they can just hide the Zach Wilson, which is quite a game they're playing right now.
Yeah. The last note I wanted to have on Hall, just to give an idea of sort of like the workload he's opening up. He has about 15. He has over 15 expected points per game, with around 10 of those per game coming from the receiving role. This is from PFF, I believe. So slightly different across sources for this metric, but that's a pretty large workload as far as AFC running backs go. That's sort of top 5 expected fantasy point workload. So that's a pretty big role. I think we've seen the Jets funnel a lot of pass game usage to the running backs, and I don't see why I think Carter has the talent to sort of take on that receiving usage if Hall missed time.
Yeah, before we move on from, there's actually some stuff I want to discuss on the Broncos side, really. So Melvin Gordon and is clearly the starter, but he's also in a timeshare there now with Latavius Murray and Mike Boone. Gordon had 11 carries for 33 yards. He also had 4 targets that he caught, 2 of them for 17 yards. Right behind him was Latavius with 8 carries for 24 yards and a score, like their only touchdown today. And he also had 3 targets that he caught 2 for -1 yards. Sam, sorry. And then Mike Boone had 4 carries, 23 yards, and he didn't really get targeted in the receiving game. What are you doing with any of these RBs? Like, it seems to be a 3-headed monster. Or are you just waiting for the dust to settle before you can really reliably play one of 2?
Yeah, I'm desperate in some leagues where I considered starting Melvin Gordon, and even in some pretty bad running back rooms, I benched him this week, and I think that's going to be my approach going forward. It looks like a 3-man, like a true 3-man split on a terrible offense. Like, regardless if it's Ripien or Russell Wilson, it's just a bad offense, right? And I think, those combination of factors make it really hard to play any of 3 of these guys. I think they're all pretty low floor and also low ceiling bets right now. So, maybe if one of them goes down and it goes to 2-man, you could start up one of these guys, but I think it's going to kind of remain a frustrating 3-man split. I don't see any 3 of these guys really having like the talent to take over this entire backfield at this point.
Actually, just want to back up to the Breece Hall and Michael Carter discussion. Rappaport just reported that Jets head coach Robert Saleh tells reporters that early tests indicate a serious knee injury for RB Breece Hall. They're having more tests done to determine if it is in fact an ACL. So prayers up for Breece. It would be a real shame to lose him after the kind of season that he was having.
Yeah, it's sad how many exciting running back prospects have had serious injuries their first year over the past couple of years. That's a real bummer. He looked amazing. So
that's really, another guy, an exciting player, unfortunately, who was guarded off with a knee injury was DK Metcalf. He left the Chargers with a knee injury, just didn't return. It was, I don't know if any of you guys saw this, but it was kind of ugly. They very quickly ruled him out. I mean, in his stead, they've been going to, and I shit you not, Marquise Goodwin. Caught 4 of his 5 targets for 67 yards and 2 scores. The game is still ongoing. So, Sam, realistically, what does this do for Tyler Lockett rest of the season? And as we heard earlier, like with Kenneth Walker breaking off a massive run, where do you rank him going forward as well?
Yeah, starting with the Tyler Lockett discussion, if Metcalf is out for the season or for a long stretch, I think that bumps up Lockett slightly, but I don't think to a massive extent. I think that that target tree was already heavily condensed to Lockett and Metcalf, and I think there sort of reaches a point of diminishing returns, right? Where I don't expect, sort of small frame Tyler Lockett at this point in his career to command some insane like 40% target share or something. But you have to say it's, I think, a slight boost to him just to reliably earn a little bit more targets on that team if Metcalf is indeed out. And I would sort of be ranking him in the maybe back end wide receiver 2, front end wide receiver 3 range. I think his usage has been solid. And then on Walker, to that question, I think you have to rank him as a top 5 running back rest of season or somewhere close to that. I'm taking Eckler over him, taking Barkley over him for sure.
CMC.
Yeah, McCaffrey. And then it starts, Hall would have been up there, right? But after those 3, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of throw your hands up. I think you can make arguments for a lot of different guys in that range, but his usage has been really strong. He looks incredibly talented, can break off, long runs. And even his passing game usage, which was a big red flag, has been a little better than expected. Looks like today, actually, he was held without a target. But he has had some receiving usage up until this week. So, yeah, I think he's right up there.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because he didn't get a target today. But if Metcalf is having to miss some time, you could see Walker start to get a little bit more involved in that. Basically, since Penny went down and since Walker kind of took over as the leading rusher, they haven't been using him quite as much. They've kind of been going to DJ Dallas in that receiving role. So I guess that's kind of the only red flag I would still have on Walker is that he's maybe not getting that receiving usage that you want to see, but maybe there are opportunities for that part of his game to grow still.
Yeah, we won't know yet. He does have that long run ability, kind of like Nick Chubb, right? Where Chubb doesn't get a lot of targets, and even Derek Henry is still getting fed in the passing game now. It's crazy, but these guys explosive running backs, man, RotoViz staple. Just wanted to talk. You mentioned Eckler, so he actually went off today as well. 9 carries, 31 yards, and a score. 12 targets, 12 catches, 96 yards, and a score. Chargers are off next week. Mike Williams he went down for the Bolts today. His right ankle and his right leg got rolled up. The bye couldn't come at a better time for them, but exiting the bye, how do you see Eckler's role staying consistent? Do you worry Keenan Allen's return in full-fledged reduces receiving usage? How are you playing the Bolts here? And if Mike Williams does miss a lot of time, do you think Gerald Everett becomes a wide receiver too?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think starting with Eckler, I was watching the Keenan return closely today to see if that would impact his receiving usage. Looks like today it obviously did not. Now, I assume Keenan did not run a full slate of routes. So we'll be looking on the data for that. But man, I don't know. I think it probably has some impact on Eckler's usage, but not a massive one. We've seen Eckler do this receiving game stuff for years while Keenan Allen's been on the field with him. I don't expect some massive downgrade in Eckler's receiving role, even when Keenan gets back to full strength. And yeah, I just want to point out with this Eckler receiving usage is insane. Around, he's getting up close to 15 expected fantasy points just from the receiving game alone, which is pretty ridiculous. And I assume that'll even rise after today. Now on the rest of the pass catchers, I would think if Williams goes down, you can start both Everett and Carter with a little bit more confidence. I think Everett jumps into sort of the low end tight end 1 discussion there, and Carter is sort of like a viable flex play. I think Palmer is also dealing with an injury now, so There could be a scenario where the targets really, if Williams is out, Keenan's 50%. I think you could see a lot of the targets go to Eckler and a little bit more than you'd expect to Everett and Carter. So definitely a situation to monitor going forward with those guys.
Yeah, I think part of so this is the hot take that I teased earlier, is that I think a lot of this Eckler usage, especially these targets, are coming not just as a result of the game plan, but also because I think Herbert is still dealing with that rib injury, right? Like, remember, like when he suffered that massive rib hit, like using Eckler as a true safety blanket and just letting him roll up yak has sort of worked well for the Chargers. I'm very curious to see if Herbert's yards per attempt or if his changes post week 8, because that would be very telling. Because I mean, like we were hearing at the time, remember when he got hurt, oh, he should be out until the bye. And so I'm going to be very interested to see if that does change, or if we're going to see a lot more short stuff, because Herbert has looked, for lack of a better word, kind of bad for a lot of how he's played this year. Want to get your guys' thoughts there, or am I just on an island?
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting in that, and for the Eckler stuff up until this point, it hasn't been very efficient receiving usage. Today he had 12 for 96, which is pretty good for a running back. But up until today, he had 16 targets for only 47 yards last week. Week 2, 10 targets for 55 yards. So like seeing that type of stuff is more like, oh, it kind of looks like the symptom of a broken offense more than like this is how they want to be playing when you see that sort of level of inefficiency on the targets. So yeah, I think that's an interesting point, but I guess, does it change, right? Like, I don't know if Herbert's I don't know if it's the O-line, I don't know if it's his ribs, but it might be sort of a structural issue with the offense that persists. So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to bring up. I didn't think about the rib injury in relation to Eckler, but something definitely to monitor.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, it's definitely not insignificant to be without Keenan Allen for a long time as well. So I think that has ramifications throughout the entire offense that hopefully we'll see this offense working better now that Allen is back. Although if Mike Williams ends up being injured for a little while, that could also be problematic. But I mean, I'm happy with this kind of usage on all my Eckler teams, so not exactly complaining.
Saving the best for last here, we want to talk CMC. He had 8 carries for 38 yards. He also got 2 of his 2 targets for 24 yards. I mean, it's wheels up, right, for CMC?
So hard to read into this game and this usage, because I mean, like, if this is what you were going to expect every week, this would be disastrous.
Yeah.
This is real.
No, but realistically, the guy I did want to get your take on, Sam, here is Brandon Ayuk. 11 targets, 7 catches, 82 yards, no scores. Overtaking Deebo Samuel, he saw 7 targets, 5 catches, 42 yards. Kittle did most of the damage. Caught 6 of his 9 targets, nice, for 98 yards and a score. But is this Ayuk usage for real? Like, how are you? Like, can you just plug him in and just plug and chug as a wide receiver 2 going forward?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with the San Francisco pass catchers, and now McCaffrey adds a whole another wrench into the mix. But all 3 guys, I think Ayuk, Deebo, and Kittle, are extremely talented. It's just that on how SF typically wants to play, usually 1 or sometimes even 2 of these guys is going to get left out on a weekly basis. That said, like, I think Ayuk and Samuel's roles are a lot closer than the public sort of perceives. Looking at weighted targets per route run, Brandon Ayuk is at about 50%. Samuel is a little bit higher than that, around 55%. But those are quite close. So I think with both of these guys, I'm starting them every week because I think they're really talented and the upside is there. But just with how SF wants to play, there's going to be there's going to be floor games. But yeah, I think the Ayuk stuff looks pretty promising to me, and I'm probably starting him, unless I'm absolutely loaded at wide receiver on my teams.
On the other side, I wanted to get your thoughts here on Juju Smith-Schuster's second week in a row here where he's done, really been fairly efficient on his volume. He caught 7 of his 8 targets today for 124 yards and a score. We saw flashes of him looking like Juju Dustbuster for a while, right? And so, Blair, what are your thoughts? Sam, what are your thoughts here with Juju?
Yeah, obviously I'm excited to see this from Juju. It's nice to kind of see him having what appears to be the start of a bounce back season that we were all kind of hoping for. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. I thought, I really liked what I saw from McCole Hardman today too, as well. And even Valdez-Scantling had a pretty good game. So, Mahomes is not going to throw for 423 yards every day, but yeah, I think you've got to be pretty optimistic about that, seeing they can still have these kind of games even without Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was exciting to see the ceiling for Juju. I think there was legitimate question after the first 4 or 5 weeks if that ceiling still existed for him. And yeah, not to sound like a broken record, but I think similar to Ayuk and almost every wide receiver in the league, there's going to be a ton of ups and downs with him, but it's good to see that the ceiling is there. And, I kind of agree, just film grinder take. When you watch him on the field, he looks kind of slow and not that good. Even his long plays, I'm like, somebody's catching this guy in the open field. A D tackle is going to chase this guy down. But yeah, I don't know. He's obviously shown he's good at football before, and I think this is definitely exciting for him.
This MVS stuff is kind of noise. 3 catches on 4 targets for 111 yards. That's kind of noisy. Isaiah Pacheco was announced as the starter, but he didn't do all that much. Him and Edwards-Helaire had a kind of a 50-50 split going, and McKinnon actually worked in a lot more. What are your thoughts on his backfield, and how are you playing it? I started Pacheco and I got rug pulled, but buddy, I got really rug pulled everywhere.
Yeah, that Rappaport report this morning tricked me in a couple spots for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's similar to the Denver discussion, except obviously this is the Chiefs offense and not a Brett Ripien led Broncos team. But it seems to be a pretty clear 3-man split between Pacheco, CEH, and McKinnon. And I think I don't think any 3 of these guys are good enough that they're gonna take the reins and dominate the backfield unless there's an injury to one of the other 2. So yeah, I don't know. I think if you're desperate, you can start CEH at RB2, but it doesn't feel good. And I think it's such a unique offense, right? And that so much of the offense goes through a tight end and Travis Kelce that I think it sometimes breaks our brains. We keep being oh, it's the Chiefs. Let's find the running back points. Let's find the wide receiver points. And the answer is it's just Travis Kelce, in the back, just stealing all the points in this offense. So I got to remind myself sometimes that chasing this Chiefs stuff can be a little bit chasing your own tail. But
you should definitely still be holding Ronald Jones though, right?
Yeah, you got to stash. They're just saving him for the stretch run. Week 17, he's going to go off.
That was always the thesis behind drafting him in the 8th round. You just need the hammer. Sam, before we get you out of here, what are you looking forward to in this Finns Steelers game that's going to be on shortly? And I'm going to just pretend like the Patriots Bears isn't happening tomorrow because that sounds like sadness.
I am so excited for some, Najee Harris 4-yard runs where he breaks 3 tackles. It's going to be incredibly exciting. Now, I think the Miami stuff is fun. Tua's been out for a couple weeks. They've had this ridiculous stretch where their starting quarterback gets injured on the first play for 3 weeks in a row, or not quite that, but something close to it. So I think Tua flashed a pretty big ceiling in this offense to start the year. The wide receivers are just so good. I mean, watching Tyreek this year has been ridiculous. He seems to be wide open every single play. So I'm really excited to see Tua back. And, it's not even really like Tyreek's been slowed down, but I think it'll be fun to see him back in that offense. But yeah.
I guess I'm just hoping that the Steelers can push the Finns, because I like to see both offenses going. Like, I'm hoping to see a big Pickens game tonight.
Yeah, and I think the Claypool stuff is interesting too, with the trade rumors around him. It sounds like the latest is like he's unlikely to be dealt, but I think obviously that the Steelers' incentive is to say that type of thing, right? So, yeah, that's an interesting situation to monitor, where I think it's three pretty talented wide receivers, and if Claypool was to be moved, then Pickens could really explode down the stretch.
Yeah, should be fun. I think probably the Steelers, at least if we can see some of these receivers go off, this could be a more exciting game than maybe we're expecting. More points than we're expecting. So it could be pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, on that note, Sam, we already mentioned you're doing stat chasing with our buddy Connor O'Driscoll. Definitely want to check that out. Where else can the people find you?
Yeah, check out Stat Chasing. So if you're in the Ship Chasing Discord, you can watch those Tuesday nights live and hop in the chat to ask questions, usually around 7 p.m. on Tuesdays. And then obviously you can just find it on YouTube and podcast apps after that for everybody else. And yeah, besides that, I post the charts that I use or that Connor and I talk through on Stat Chasing every week on Twitter. I try to get them out Tuesday night, so it's helpful for folks doing waivers or whatever else you might need them for. I think they're relevant for waivers, DFS, best ball, sort of anything in fantasy. So yeah, that's it. But yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, guys. That was a ton of fun. Definitely an interesting week to talk through, and yeah, had a good time.
For sure. Yeah, definitely check out Sam's work. If you're not already subscribed to the RotoViz channel, make sure you do that. Give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app, and we will talk at you later.